Yeah. But in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started, and we can always wrap around for those folks who want to join us as well. Just want to make sure no one's having any technical difficulties, and it doesn't look like I have anything in my email. So we'll go ahead and begin, and we can let people in as they come. So for those who don't know me, my name is Alessandra Birding. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations at Trinity. I have been with Trinity since 2019. And we began this virtual Trinity Talks program during COVID. So I'm really excited to have Amber here with us tonight. Just a couple housekeeping items tonight. We are recording the event, so just keep that in mind. We are going to be posting this onto our website for those who would like to view it later. So just keep that in mind. If you have any questions during Amber's presentation, please go ahead and put that in the chat box. You can send a direct message to me, or you can send it to everyone. Just go ahead and put questions in that chat box for us. At the end of Amber's presentation, we'll go ahead and have some time for questions. You are able to unmute yourself, but please just hold off to unmute yourself at the end when it's time for questions. So please go ahead and just hold off unmuting yourself until the end. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime, go ahead and put them in the chat for us. Let's see if there's anything else I have for you. I think that's it on my end. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Amber for you. I'm going to read a short bio for her, and then I'm going to go ahead and just pass it on over to her. All right. So Amber Robles Gordon has over 15 years of exhibiting, art education, and exhibit coordination experience. She received a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration in 2005 from Trinity, Washington, and subsequently a Master's in Fine Arts in Painting in 2011 from Howard University. At Howard, she received annual awards and accolades for her artwork. Amber currently has a solo exhibit at American University entitled Secessions Traversing U.S. Colonialism. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Amber now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my name is Amber Robles Gordon, and the name of this talk is Cultivating Inner Voice, Connective Tissue, and Threading Visions. Alessandra, can you go to the first slide, please? So this is a picture of my mother and father, and in the bottom left, you'll see me. And this is 5-year-old Amber. This is the only picture I have right now of me as a 5-year-old, and I thought that was kind of funny. But I am using this image because this talk and the exhibit that I'm going to be referencing, which is Successions Traversing U.S. Colonialism at American University, my solo exhibition at American University, is about a journey to heal my 5-year-old self. And I'm going to talk briefly about that in relation to how I started one aspect of listening to my 5-year-old self. And I think it's really interesting that in this one instance, and I'm sure there was others throughout my life, but in this one 5-year-old self instance, I don't know that I should have listened to my inner voice. Maybe, if I was another person or had a different character at that point, then maybe I would have turned out to be a different person, and that'll make sense. Sounds a little weird right now, but so. At 5, my family's from St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, Antigua, and I was born in Puerto Rico. However, I was raised in Arlington, Virginia, and about 5 years old, my mother tells me that I came to her and told her that I didn't want to speak Spanish anymore. Spanish was my first language, and my family, including my mother, are Afro-Latinas. And so this was kind of a shock to her. I didn't want to speak Spanish anymore because I was being teased at school. I didn't look like how a Latina person or Latino person, I guess, appeared in the people's minds that were teasing me. So in some sense, I tucked away a portion of who I was in order to not be teased, in order to assimilate, in order to just be able to exist in that 5-year-old self. So if we can advance, if you fast forward into my life, by 8, I knew I wanted to be an artist. It was really clear to me. By 30, my goal was to then go back to Puerto Rico and figure out how to be there for an extended period of time, to create artwork and to build experiences and bonds with other people of the territory. In doing so, I reached out to a writer that I know. His name is Edwin Velasquez Calazo. And he had written about my work for a period of time. In 2016 or 2017, I reached out to him. I said, basically what I just told you guys, I want to be in PR. I want to show my work, want to create there. And it took about 6 to 8 months of cultivating and reaching out. But eventually a gallery called Universidad de Sagrado de Corazón, which is Sacred Heart University, a curator by the name of Norma Vila, reached out and said that she liked my work and she wanted me to propose something because she was thinking of having offering a solo exhibition. So I proposed literally what I just relayed to you guys, and they accepted. In 2019, my mother and I, we arranged with the university to come see the gallery space and kind of get to know the campus, the university campus, and see if we can start the bonding in PR. And the cool thing about that was that this was my mother and I's first journey, like mother and daughter trip together. And sometimes about life is that you don't know that things are important until you're actually doing them. And I didn't realize how important it was for a mother and a child, especially a woman, to be able to do that. And my mother was raised in PR from about 3 to 12 or 13 years old. So for her, it was like going back to, her childhood home. So where she was reliving her childhood experiences in that journey, and I was making new ones in addition as an adult, but also with my mother. So it was a really nurturing and giving time. So I have this tree up here, and it's it's a rubber tree, also a banyan tree. And it's one of the first things we encountered as we were on Sagrado de Corazon's campus. And their campus, they have an arboretum. And so each tree is, documented and titled and all this thing. And I remember coming to this tree and just being taken back by it. It was so masterful to me. The fact that it's, and this is not the first one I saw, this is a little bit different, but the one that I saw was like rooted, and it had all these roots that came and kind of collectively combined into a tree, a trunk, and came up with the roots and then comes down. And of course there were branches and leaves, but some of the actual roots come back down. And I was just fascinated by this tree. So what I realized, one of the things that I promised myself during this trip was that I was going to be sketching. I was gonna, because it's a luxury that I don't always get to have, even though I'm an artist and do this full time. I don't always get to just simply sketch. So if you can advance to the next slide for me. So these are some of the sketches that I did while in Puerto Rico. And what I realized as I was sketching is that the majority of my sketches were, I was abstracting the banyan tree, the rubber tree. And when it came time to start the first 10 of the works that are going to be included in this exhibit at AU, I began to then cut apart and abstract even further these sketches, and they all became the central being in the works. And this will make sense in a minute because when we advance to the next slide. And they centered the rest of the works. They were the foundation for the rest of the works. Can we advance to the next one? So if you look, this one is called Clotheslines, Community, and Eternal Energy. And on the bottom, you can see where the abstracted rubber tree starts at the bottom, comes up the center, and then comes out to out the top, or comes down from the top. And this was really an essential, what I would call a connective tissue that you'll see throughout the works that I'm about to show you. Throughout this series, which is Place of Breath and Birth, And it's literally about my interpretation, my time in Puerto Rico, and then some of the things that I came across while I was studying to produce these works and researching to produce these works. So, for example, one of the other connective tissues in this work are what I would call an atmospheric effect, and or pulling on what's called Afrofuturism, which is a movement. It's a literary and artistic movement that talks about projecting what African Americans want to see about themselves, either in their existence right now or projecting in the future. And the atmospheric effect, I kind of push. I don't necessarily go use it as it's known, but I like to play with perspective and using the tree to divide the space and also a circle to divide the space. And I will go into that a little bit more. If we can advance to the next one. This one is called My Flag Flies Higher Than Yours. And it is absolutely referencing some of the things that have happened between the US government and Puerto Rican, the US government's treatment of Puerto Rico. So one of the things as I was studying through to create this body of works was realizing that the US was not treating Puerto Ricans what I would consider fairly or appropriately. And in doing so, I also realized that it was not, and hold on, let me go back. So in reasoning they were doing this, in my opinion, is one, because of their language, two, because of their specific culture, and three, the color of their skin. So a form of colorism. Or just basically treating people differently because they are not, they're not white. So once I realized this, it helped me to form the reasoning and the basis for what the larger works in this series are, and that's the quilts. So a little bit further, we'll show you that each quilt represents a US territory. In the US territories, you have, I'm including the Federal District of Columbia. You have Guam, you have Puerto Rico, you have USVI. USVI is a combination of St. John, St. Croix, and St. Thomas, and you have American Samoa and Northern Mariana Islands. And I go into that a little bit further, but before I do that, one of the other connective tissues was, if you look at this, kind of the layering of information in this work and some of the others, what I'm doing is talking, it's the atmospheric effect, where you're using the atmosphere, using colors, using symbols to create a sort of nature-based effect, but you're pushing the boundaries of what you supposedly see. And I did that because where we were staying in Puerto Rico, through the time that I was there in my self-appointed residency, was about, you can see, about 3-4 miles out. And I like to say that it's not just, and it's not that my view was like this pristine view. You know, of course, there were beautiful homes, but there were also homes that were not. You know, there were some homes that were abandoned, and there were places that were absolutely taken care of and kept. But it was all part of the texture, all part of the landscape, all part of what is, you know, a Caribbean island. And one of the luxuries I had some days while I was there was be able to see the transition from day to night and night to day. And it's one of the things I tried to focus on the most in this body of work. Like each work, you should be able to see some transition of night to day and day to night. Can we advance to the next one? This one is botanical of love, self-reflection, and spirituality. So the Botanica is, it's almost like a pharmacy, but a natural-based pharmacy in the Caribbean and some parts of Latin America. And it's very specifically a cultural entity within Puerto Rico and St. Thomas and other Caribbean islands. You can get anything from a love potion to actual herbal remedies, healing remedies. And I made it my business to go to various ones throughout Puerto Rico. And in this work, if you look into the left, There's an image of me at 30 something, and then there's an image of me at maybe 16 or 18. And going back to PR and as an adult, because I hadn't had the experience of being there throughout my childhood, except for, I think my mother told me we went there at 5. I don't remember that. So this was really pivotal in like getting to know like a thick sliver of who I am, and then being able to represent it through artwork. It was an aspect of healing for me. Can we advance to the next slide? So one of the other connective tissues is the circular forms in these works. If you notice, each work, like I said, has some sort of iteration of a drawing and or abstracting of the banyan tree, but also I am embed some of the things I am trying to speak about or project about in circles. So throughout the years, as part of my own research or works that I've done, I've researched about how spells are casted, mysticism, and how spiritual-based medicines or practices are created, and most of them are created in circles. So this is one of the ways that I cast spells, say prayers, and or talk about things that concerns me. For this particular work, this one is titled Reflections of Self, the Virgin Mary, and Colonialism. And this was actually little snippets of this are pictures that I took while I was at Sagrado de Corazon Sacred Heart University, in one of the chapels that they have inside of the university itself, and juxtaposing, because some of this imagery, if you look at the very bottom, there is a reflection, depiction of the caste system that is used throughout Spain, or was past tense used, and has hence influenced the way the treatment of people of color throughout the Americas, which is a reflection of colonialism, a reflection of imperialism. And when I see some of the imageries such as this, it's always triggered me to have this inner dialogue about why are certain images used, held to a certain esteem, and or what other images should be in this conversation, and am I reflected in the imagery that I'm looking at, and if not, why not, and is this a true reflection of the time, like historically, and one of the examples I use, if you I have been to Italy before, the American Academy of Rome, for a artist residency. And I remember seeing all of the various sculptures that were in throughout Rome. And even some of the scholars that I have interacted with there, they questioned, why are these sculptures still at this stage where they are completely white? And if you know anything about art history and that specific type of sculpture, usually it's not that the artist intended for them to remain white. It is something that happens years after, and it is unfortunately it's in response to almost like they're trying to cover up who actually existed in that time frame. Because when it comes to anthropology and things like that are gone through and investigated how gone through the layers of paint and overlaying, you will find color. You will find actual color, meaning that the skin tone was not pale. Even the actual garbs that they have on were not white. So it's one of the interesting things, at least I think is interesting about education, about art history, that sometimes gets depicted in my work. Can we advance to the next one? So this work, crap, the title is not there. All right, so this one has a long title and I do not know it by heart, but it is basically about, but I have to get you the title. Give me a second. It's basically about a study that was done in Puerto Rico between Margaret Sanger and another doctor that she hired, that she was in a she commissioned to do a study to create birth control. And sadly, so Margaret Sanger, I think you guys probably know of her. She was the person that eventually started Planned Parenthood. But unfortunately, there was some underlying, what I would consider suspect agenda under there. Margaret had some very strong thoughts about procreation of people of color, and went through certain measures to try and curtail the amount of women that were either able to have what do you call that? Either birth control and or they sanctioned, what is that procedure that you can get done with to stop a woman from having babies? Whatever that procedure is, she was also one of the people that helped to advocate for that in places like Puerto Rico. So because of the breakdown in the management or overseeing of some of the education and or health care in places of the territories, for example, Puerto Rico, many doctors and practices realized that they could get away with having experimentations on people of color, either because their race, their assumed lack of education, and their varied language. So they arranged to have this trial, and they did it through a university. 3 Puerto Rican women died of of the version of birth control that they were on. They absolutely didn't even do any further investigation on that in relation to autopsies or anything like that. Shortly after that, more of the women in the trial came and expressed their desire to leave the trial, and because of some of the side effects that they were having. And unfortunately, they were ignored. They literally tried to talk them out of their experiences. And when they tried to leave the study, they basically held their grades over them. They said that if you were not able, that they were not willingly to finish the trial, that they would not be able to either matriculate, period, and or finish that actual course. And that was one of the saddest things. As I've been giving tours on this exhibit, and someone asked me what was the most surprising thing that I've learned through my research, and absolutely that some of the things that I would consider them atrocities that the U.S. government has done in order to annex, gain, and maintain land were just horrifying. And to me, this is horrifying. So this ring that you guys see, this is a reflection of I don't know if the ladies in the room remember the old school birth control dial. And you would move it and you push out your pill. Well, that's a representation of that dial, and this is an altar. And the title is something like the eternal altar for the women forsaken and the lives lost. But the choice must always remain hers. And I'm surprised I remembered all that. But this is one of the very essential, and actually this was the last work that I did in the series, and there were points in this where I did not think I was going to finish it. It was such a doozy for me, but amen, so that I did finish it. Can we advance to the next one? All right, so as I explained earlier, this is part of the quilt aspect of the exhibit, and the series that I just went through, Place of Breath and Birth, that was where I was considering my own personal interaction with and history with PR connection. And because of that study, then I was then able to see that it was not just about Puerto Ricans. It was also about people of color, that I consider of color, or that are non-white, most majority of them speak another language, have a very specific culture. And the assumption is, at least the current assumption, if you look at documents that were produced in, very early on, they weren't even looking at people of the territories as full-fledged human beings to some degree. Some of the verbiage was just horrendous. But it was absolutely this reasoning that I decided to try and speak about the territories. So this work is called DC Political, and DC Political, Welcome to the District of Colonialism. As I was representing and trying to figure out how to create the quilts, I realized that I wanted to dissect either the territory's seal or their flag. And this particular territory, the District of Columbia, had a lot of figuration in their seal. And if you look at the very center left, you can see that it broke down the actual seal. It says, "Welcome to the District of Columbia." And underneath that array of text is accumulation of text that speaks to the ways in which the US government has failed either Native American and indigenous community and or people of African descent. And we're not just talking about this long lost list of things that happened to people 100 or 400 or 500 years ago. We're also listing things like, oh God, it just left my brain. Redlining, because redlining still happens to African Americans. This one is oriented a little bit differently than the others because I wanted to have some sort of like map, geographical representation of the District of Columbia. And as I mentioned before, all of the works are embedded in a layer of circles to talk about what I wanted to bring into the attention of the people, of the viewer. So when I got done with primarily this DC Political and the USVI Political, and I'm working with the images side by side in my studio, I realized that this is not my criticism or my opinion of the U.S. territory, of the U.S. government's influence on the territories was not what I wanted to just leave the viewer with. I felt as though if I did that, that I would be in some sense doing what the US has done to the territories, not looking at them as a whole being, a whole community, culture, ethnicity, and group of human beings. So that's when I decided that I wanted to look at, to make the quilts double-sided so that the back of the quilt would be representing the spiritual aspects of each territory. Can we advance to the next one? So this is the back of DC Political. And this quilt represents the 3 indigenous tribes of Native Americans that resided in the District of Columbia, whom now reside in Southern Maryland, primarily in Southern Maryland. Now, as I was doing this, I just want to make sure my time, okay, I'm doing pretty good. As I was doing this and I started to research individually each of the 3 tribes, and looking at their iconography, looking at their symbolism and their individual cultural aspects, I then had to pull back because what I realized is if I was to do that, use specific attributes of their heritage to create a narrative, that I would be bordering what I would call appropriation. And that's not what I wanted to do. So at that point, and this took a lot because there was a certain point in this measure where I almost said, is this something that I can continue to do? And I had to think about what was my overall intention and or purpose of creating this work, which is to talk about people of the greater majority and talk to people in general. So at that point, I decided I wanted to be as abstract as possible. Now, can we go to the next? Not this one, but the next one. Crap. Okay, one more. There it is. Thank you. All right. So I'm referring to, in this part of the conversation, this is USVI Spiritual. And right now I'm only talking about the grays and whites portion that is the abstracted, the banyan tree. It comes up and then goes all the way up, right? So I have been a teacher. I taught kindergarten to high school art. And when you teach art, one of the things that I would do is you're programmed to begin with the line, the shape, the curve, cross hatching, and then build up to represent a three-dimensional form on a two-dimensional plane. And I use this analogy because one day when I was working on this work, I got up, went to the kitchen, came back, and I saw a figure looking back at me. And I was like, damn, why are you there, figure? And that was my first response, because like I said earlier, my goal was to keep the work as abstract as possible, to stay away from being any identifying figuration. But the interesting thing that happened is that this particular quilt is the spiritual side of USVI. And as I said at the beginning of the talk, my personal heritage is absolutely from a combination of USVI, which is St. Thomas, St. John, and also St. Croix. So when I saw this figuration, I knew what it was. I could identify it. This is what I would call the Mokojumbi. And the Mokojumbi is from Central Africa. It's a healer. And that energy has been used and has been a part of carnivals, Caribbean carnivals throughout time. And the Mokojumbi is the people that are on the stilts in a carnival. And I then named this quilt USVI Spiritual Mokojumbi Walk Tall, Heal Forward. Carnival is something that happens every year, and it's part of the rejuvenation and the celebration of life. It's how Caribbean people celebrate spirituality, culture, and I also believe that it's part of their healing forward. Hence why I named it what I named it. So can we go back maybe one slide, Alessandra? Okay, next one. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I thought was really important about talking about the territories is about environmental racism. So in the gradation that you see within this circle, and this is the one that represents USVI political. And now can we go to the next, the slide forward? Thank you. I'm using that gradation, that color where you're working through red, and then what I call a color gradation, right? A rainbow gradation, to represent the Doppler system. And while I was researching for this to create these works, I'm looking at the Doppler system. I'm looking at very specifically how it depicts Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Maria. And then I was starting to look for parallel ways in which our society and or science has depicts either high blood pressure, which is on the far left, then in the middle, how we depict air quality, and then biometric scans of our body about where pressure is and how it resonates in our body, in our steps. And all those things were kind of like the, I don't know, like little data points, and they affected how I then depicted talking about environmental racism within the circles of each, with each representation of the territories. And one of the reasons I think this is so extremely important is because, for example, you have Hurricane Irma that affected both St. Thomas and Puerto Rico. And then you have typhoons that affect Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. And not only that, but you also have issues with, because they're all islands, they're all impacted in relationship to the fact that they are surrounded by water. And if you do any research about that, and like even Northern Mariana Islands, they have issues with the fact that to some degree the land is sinking. So in Guam, the representation that I did of Guam and I believe American Samoa, they have a very high rate of people that ended up choosing to use or be in the armed forces, you know? And part of that is because of the amount of funding that is or is not being given to the territories, which would then have affect things like telecommunications, educational opportunities, even basics in relationship to the pipes that are and the water systems that have been affected by either decay and or the effect of disastrous weather. And when those things, when those infrastructures are not appropriately and collectively funded throughout years, you're going to have some type of breakdown. And that is one of the things that have happened. In addition to that, you also have how the armed forces has affected by annexing and taking parts of indigenous land and using them for their bases, and how that is not just something that's happened in past tense, that is something that they are still trying to gain more land in some of these territories. So that is absolutely, part of the reasoning that I thought it was important to point out these things that are still happening to people that reside in the territories. So can we advance, Alessandra? Thank you. One more. So this is an actual shot of how the work is hung. And I've divided the exhibit in two different viewpoints, in two different entries. This is the political view. So when you come into the main entry, you will see a text, and of course, the successions traversing U.S. colonialism, and it will speak to the political view in relationship to the territories, where I'm dissecting the seal and or the flag. The next slide should show you the spiritual view, where I truly believe that it's important to look at a community of people as not just from their political attributes and or how that can advance an entity. I needed for people to be able to walk up to both sides and literally have to confront what I'm trying to convey. And that's why we hung them from the ceiling. And I hope that that's, that comes across, or at least I've been told thus far that that's what comes across, as you have to, because they are about 90 by 104 inches. So they're huge. Can we advance to the next one? This one is Puerto Rico, and this is one of the ones that I wanted to show you, is like side by side. The left is the Puerto Rican political, and the right is the spiritual. And one of the other things that I didn't point out about the black and white and grays connecting, I mentioned that it's abstracted, and it represents also the abstracted banyan tree. But it's also about a skeletal system. It was one of the ways that I tried to make the spiritual side seem human-like, in that I consider that the skeletal part of the essence. Can we advance to the next one? So this is just a picture of my studio as I was working. As I mentioned, the works were side by side. This is USVI spiritual on the left, and the representation of the 3 indigenous tribes, the spiritual of DC, on the right. Can we advance? Thank you. So we're almost there, I promise. This is actually the first quilt that I did of the series in general, and this is back when I did not know that it was going to be a double-sided work, but this work is representing my energy, and it's about my forward-facing self. And I also, it's a little bit of a protest as well, because it's the work that I would create at that point, almost 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago. If I didn't have any political or concerns tapping at the base of my head, this is what I would have created. If we can advance to the next one. And once we decided that the works were going to be double-sided, I said, well, then I'm on a spiritual side of my energy. And so this one represents my spiritual energy, either what I am, a portion of what I am now, and then what I hope to become. If we can advance to the next one, and then you can see the full range of the spiritual behind it. So this, and I'll go through this really quickly. This is this is the reference wall, and I wanted to it's important in showing, I guess, such a broad range of ideas in the works themselves. I wanted to have one central point where I could show you data points of how I worked up into to create both bodies of works. So in this, on the columns on the right and left, you'll see the actual sketches that I did while in Puerto Rico. There's depictions of the Taino Indians that are indigenous to PR. You'll see other pictures of the banyan tree, the rubber tree. There's individual shots of figurines that are of, oh God, what are they called? Forgive me, I cannot think of them now, but they're religious figurines and spiritual figurines that you can find throughout botanicas. There are other images of the actual Doppler system as it relates to Irma and Hurricane Maria. And then there's just a couple other images that we took while in PR as we were observing some of the wonderful murals and graffiti community that was throughout the island. So there's just one other shot, and that shot is just the conversation, because I was really fortunate. One of the primary sources that I used throughout studying or researching about this work was How to Hide an Empire, and I reached out to the author, which is Daniel Emivar, and asked him if he would be interested in having a talk with me about his book and my work. And he agreed. So that happened. I just thought that was really awesome and wanted to share that because it was a really interesting conversation about the parallels in relation to the US involvement in the territories. So that is my talk. I welcome any, questions, comments, concerns.
Thank you so much, Amber. That was fantastic. Your art is absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous. Does anybody have any questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself, ask Amber directly. Maybe Amber, let us know how we could visit the exhibit at American as well.
Yeah, so the show is definitely up at American University Museum at the Katzen Art Center. We are offering tours, and it's also open to the public between Friday and Sunday, 11 to 4 p.m. And if you either contact me, if you're interested in a tour, the tours can be up to 15 people. You can either contact myself, and my email address is amberroblesgordon@gmail, AMBERROBLESGORDON at Gmail, and or contact the museum directly.
And I will go ahead and link the museum exhibit in an email to everybody after as well. So
I really appreciate that.
Absolutely, no problem. Is there any questions for Amber? You can go ahead and ask her directly. We have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes set aside for any questions.
Well, your presentation was wonderful, Amber. So interesting, so fascinating. This is Liz speaking.
Thank you so much.
I was wondering about the reflection of self, that one, where you had the two circles. It kind of looked like a Venn diagram.
You're not the first one to say that.
So I'm just wondering if was there anything in between that we should know about?
Well, so that's interesting. Okay, so it's funny. Can we go back? Do you know which one that is? I think it's out of the first set of images.
Towards the beginning.
Yeah, it's the one with the two where I'm actually, because I actually consider that a portrait. And I really believe you go all the way back.
Yeah.
It's not based on a Venn diagram,
Okay.
you know, this one, thank you. But it absolutely is about the parallels with in relationship to womanhood and who is I don't know how to express. For some reason, I'm lost for words today, because I could talk about this any other daggone day. But it's about what is reflected back when you're looking at images that happen to be religious-based images. And to some degree, you know, why are they always people that are not always, but they're very often people that are not of color? And it's always triggered me to question, well, why is that? And how is that a reflection of what really has gone on in that region, in that part of the world? And why? Because if you look back, you know, at actual history, one particular entity, although in control, does not mean that that's the only representation of who was cherished, of who was loved, of who was adorned throughout history. And it's so, in going back as an adult and looking at this you know, wonderful space, it's also about looking at who are we talking about here. And this is a way of me kind of triggering it and or engaging and having that further conversation. Some of it also is about colorism, but definitely about colonialism and how and spirituality and religious practices and how they're used.
That seems like some of the overlap is like when you were talking about things that happen to women, that Puerto Rican women, that, you know, through the Planned Parenthood and being sterilized. Well, that happened to Black women in the South. So, you know, I see
Absolutely.
some very, you know, some overlap there, and that's what just made me think, oh yeah, there's that little part of the what I see as a Venn diagram. There's stuff in there too, because it's happening not only here but other places, and it's like you say, it's like a reflection, a mirror looking back, maybe two different, you know,
Absolutely.
two different groups.
And the Venn diagram is about the commonalities of three different factors, if I'm not mistaken. So this is absolutely, it wasn't intentional, but it's about my love and how I rely on geometric forms, specifically the circle or the triangle, to talk about the relationship between masculine and feminine energy throughout our society. So wasn't intentional in that way, but it actually was intentional. So
I guess the art is, you know, when it's the person that's observing, maybe they could see things that you had no intention, but you know, it
that's
popped
also
up.
true. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely, because each person comes to artwork and or an experience with their own social construct, and whatever that social construct, you know, is embedded based on your own experiences.
absolutely.
So yeah, but thank you for pointing.
I appreciate you very much. Did you say that everything in this collection sort of had, I don't know how you called it, but it was like the rubber tree was sort of in everything somehow?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So like this one is actually an amended version of it. It's not as defined, but if you go either to the left or to the right, I've abstracted. Like for example,
I see it clearly some places.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I didn't include all of the works.
Right.
So in the quilts, if you go back to the quilts real quick, which is the really large. Yes. Okay, that one. Thank you. So in the quilts, it's there, but all of the materials that I use for the abstracted tree in the quilts is fabric. Which in the smaller works, it's paper. So it appears a little differently, but they're absolutely there. And if you go to the next one, please, Alessandra. Sorry, next one. If you go to this one, you'll see that it comes out even more in the spiritual side. And I don't know that I intended that, but I'm so glad it happened because my connection, I look at that as almost like a reflection of my connection and how I responded to the tree initially. and then impose that feeling, that connection as it relates to all of the people that I hope to be, talking to or for about in the territories. So
Right. Well, it's awesome. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your bringing this to us. Art is something that we didn't really get a lot of introduction to growing up. Now, I was thinking about you and your 5-year-old self, and my 5-year-old self. We kind of was limited. So I'm happy to be almost 60, getting getting exposed to something new.
yeah, and what I was trying to convey, in relationship to the, connecting to your voice, and the connective tissues, and then cultivating visions. I was trying to have it so that you could see for my own self how that continued conversation with self, and how the majority of what I saw was like what I felt, and what led me to this was my own search to heal myself and to further know and connect with myself. But in doing so, other little droplets of connective tissues happened and came, and then I had to deal with that, what that meant, but that it helped me to have this conversation. I hope that the world accepts through the work, but on a larger scale. And to me, that in itself, we all have access to that in some shape or form in relationship to our own individual experience. Now, I will say what sometimes the world does, whether it's through, parenting, whether it's through education, whether it's through some of the negative, the fear-based responses that people give us throughout our lives, that some of that can be damped out. But I absolutely believe that listening, figuring out where your threads and connective tissues and that voice is inside, you can get back to it, because we have all been gifted it originally.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was trying to say with this talk specifically.
You said it. Thank you so much. I won't take up all the time.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Right.
So thank you for that very powerful presentation and for sharing so deeply.
Thank you.
Explaining your work. It touched on a lot of things for me too, and things that I needed to hear. Also, but my question is about like the materials you used and artwork itself. I recently started making a baby doll quilt. I haven't quilted in 30 years. I did of it when I was younger. And I was wondering, it's tapping into our traditions in this country too. And I was wondering, for the quilted ones, did you with the fabric, was that like a new learning experience for you, working with fabric rather than paper in a collage, cutting out the fabric? And anyway.
So sure. Okay, so the thing about my work in general is that usually all my work does include some type of fabric, but I have been creating for 20 plus years, and so my work spans a range of materials. Now, in relationship to this, the base itself, and I didn't know how far to go into in relationship to materials and materiality, because this is not a art-oriented talk, but I'm so glad you asked. But so the quilt itself was handmade, but it was made in PR. Now, then we applied the acrylic base, where you see on this one, it is the spiritual side. The majority, at least 4 of the spiritual sides, have a black base. And then on top of that, you have the circles. All the circles are then painted. The gradation, the color gradation, that happens in this one, it's paint and like a rubber material, and then layers of actual fabric. And then inside, like the web part of it, you have glass, you have paint, you have leather, you have oil pastels, you have oil paint sticks. And then the inner parts is the skeletal parts. That is oil paint sticks, that's oil pastels, that's even pencil. And then of course, over top of it, you have layers of mediums to solidify and protect the various mediums together. But for the most part, the only parts that are sewn on these works are the heavier anchoring items. The only part that on this side of this that is sewn is there is beadwork. And no, I did not do the beadwork. It is something that is adhered to the work. It's about this much of beadwork. It's actually really stunning. And there's one on each side. So for example, I haven't figured out how to classify this, but it's not necessarily quilting, but it's absolutely using paint, and I would call it assemblaging on a quilt, if anything.
Well, thank you very much, because it's wonderful to be able to see a virtual presentation. It's hard for me to get down to AU, but the thing is, you can't see the material, you know, you're not close enough to the material. So this was very helpful. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I hope that you can actually see it, because it's a totally different experience.
Your mother seen it?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, she has. And then in addition to that, she saw it as I was creating it through stages. So yeah.
Do we have any other questions for Amber?
Hi, yes, I have a question. I just wanted to say, like, it's so cool that you're a Trinity sister, because I was like,
thank you.
2018, so it's cool. I love your portraits. They're just so psychedelic, but like with meaning, if that makes sense. Like, it's not, it's just throwing stuff together. Like, I just love how everything just has like a purpose and a meaning. So I really love the presentation.
Thank you.
My question is just like maybe like a more introspective question. Like, how do you, like, what is your advice for creatives of any category? Like, how do you go on with your art if you have like pushback, or how to continue being creative if you feel unsure of yourself? Like, how do you deal with that?
So I will tell you, I know that in creative fields that is even more prevalent, right? But that is something that everybody is dealing with to some degree, right? And I'm not saying that as though that makes it easier or anything, but it absolutely is. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
Oh, I'm 25.
You're 25. Okay. So have you known that you wanted to be in the creative line earlier than 25?
Yes. It's funny because when I was in Trinity, I was a bio major, but I turned to English, and I knew then I wanted to be a writer, but it was just, I still write, but it's just sometimes a lot of pushback because, your parents and like, what's the traditional route and whatnot. So now I'm like completely set. Like, I'm trying to get my MFA and I'm going after that. So I am
in what?
In poetry and fiction. So
wow.
I've always loved writing. As a kid too, when you talked about your experience, I was like, yeah, it kind of clicked. I was like, I've always been doing this. It's just,
that's awesome.
When are you gonna start doing it?
Yeah.
Seriously.
So I will tell you, one of the things that I would tell you is to create like this long, exhausting list of goals. Map out what you want to do, and be as ridiculous as you can on paper. Because one of the things you'll find is that you're going to have to believe in yourself more than anyone else would ever believe. And then just think about all the other odds not against us, but the other odds that we have to face in relationship to everything outside of this screen right now, right? You got to put down your roadmap on paper. And then you got to go refer to it often, frequently, check back in every month at one point, every 3 months at another. You have to become your own, you have to become vigilant on your own. And then you have to seek out others that want, something very, if not the exact same thing, then something very similar. And then, you have to be careful of who you choose as your friends, but you absolutely need a support system. And I will tell you, not all your family is going to be part of that support system. And when you need that specific type of support, you need to figure out who do you go to, right? But it's like any type of other nourishment or healing action that you're trying to do in your life, right? Yeah. But in order to have something to check back to reference, you got to have it down on paper. It's got to be something that and I've often heard people tell that you can also share it with someone else, like share it with someone that you actually trust and know. And if that works for you too, but you have to be your biggest fan. And you have to put it to action, because after you then put it on paper, you have to figure out what the action steps are. And for people that sounds like, oh my God, I can't deal with that, then you chunk it.
Yeah.
Meaning you break it down into sections, into manageable sections, and then compare this to like something that you're trying to do. Like, for example, if you're dealing with some type of ailment or in your body, or exercising, and because we all know that all exercise regimens don't always work for you, for a specific person. What do you do then? Do you just don't listen to your doctor, or you don't, whatever it is. You then have to revamp, you then have to modify, and not beat yourself up in that process. But it's like editing, actually.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
I hope that helped.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me, Opal?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Now, I want to thank you for this show. I moved back to the small town from Washington, D.C., Andy Griffin's Mayberry, and I could not go to a good museum or anything to see art. I've collected. I'm 80 years old, and I want to thank you for this opportunity just to see some art.
You are absolutely welcome.
And it's gorgeous.
Oh, that touches my heart. Thank you very much.
And I love the meaning to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amber. I really appreciate it. Sounds like everyone really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for everyone's time this evening, all these amazing Trinity alumni women. So thank you very, very much. And as I mentioned, I will link the show information in a thank you email as well. And it will be recorded and on our alumni page if you want to view it, or send it to any other alumni to view as well. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, Amber.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for having it.